All right, people. Recap 2024, recap number 3. Top 10 movies of 2024. Admittedly, this is a list that I should be really excited about, and I am, because these are the best that I could pick from 2024. But yeah, still not a good year. I'm still not giving an inch on that one. Awful,
Right.
awful year for movies. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
everybody who says that it was a good year is wrong. I understand why they think that way, but they are simply wrong. I'm joined by Dustin, and
Yo.
first time on the podcast, but not first time in this space at all, Mr. Chris Nareen. Chris, happy to have you here, dude.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's been, like I said, we've known you quite a long time. You've been in these spaces for quite a long time. Why don't you...
Almost 15 years now.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, why don't you give the Talkin TV audience some backstory into your YouTube origin and journey?
All right. I'd say I first got into movies in general, or I guess kind of like looking at them from a more critical lens around 2009. I'd say early 2009. That same year, I discovered a lot of emerging young YouTube movie reviewers, and briefly, I made movie reviews of my own. I met Dustin here, as you know, one of my best friends, and someone who I very, very grateful to know and to be friends with, and I mean a lot to me, as you know. And I met you years later too, Dominic. I don't really do reviews or anything like that anymore on YouTube. I've considered doing some podcast stuff. I have a lot going on in my life right now, so not sure when all of that will unfold. But my love for movies has not changed. Through things like Letterboxd, and I still find other people to just connect with and talk to about movies. And even in my own personal life, I still am very vocal about my love for movies and how much they mean to me in a lot of ways. And yeah, I love movies, as I'm sure everyone else here does.
Yes, well, you could hope, but yes,
Yeah.
one of the true YouTube film fans, OGs, right here. Dustin, man, you and I have talked about it at length about how
Right.
awful not only this decade but this year has been.
Yeah.
Man, 2024 as a year. I did the worst of last week with Kristen, Mac, and Luke,
Yeah.
and now we're here to do the best. But I feel like even with okay, these are the 10 best movies that we can come up with this year. But I still feel like there was a little bit of oh man, it felt like picking the best of just a really, really mediocre, awful batch. That's saying something considering that this is the decade that has all but killed film overall.
I mean, yet again, there's 8.5s in my top 10. When I was a teenager, as you guys well know, my top 10s did not have 8.5s in them, people. They were lucky to have 9s. They were usually 9.5s, really, in the great years at least. But that's my point. Where I'm just saying, when I say a year, or we're saying at least, I know you guys. When you guys say a year is bad to me, you're not coming at me with a trollish kind of point of view. At least Chris. Yeah. Because Dominic can be hyperbolic sometimes. But yeah, there's good movies every year. That's not the argument. That's the thing that people like to say. Oh, you think there's no great movies that came out in a said year? No, that's not what I mean. I'm just saying the year overall just pales into comparison to other years. And if you're comparing the films that come out in a certain year, a certain director comes out with a movie, and then you have to compare it to their other movies too from other better years. So yeah, that's where I'm coming at. When it comes to my top 10, I usually like to put the movies that I enjoy the most, and by the filmmakers, and some of them by the filmmakers at the peak of their game. That's what we can all hope for in our top 10. But yet again, I haven't had a 10 again. No 10s this year. No 10 at all yet for Dusty in the 2020s. So we're 5 years deep now. That's really alarming. And maybe that's playing part in my depression. But I don't know. I think it's a little bit to do with it. But yeah, There were some good movies this year, and we're going to talk about those. I get you had a lot of people that you wanted on for the worst of episode. I get it, and like, what else could I say? I mean, I would have had like a slightly different list in terms of like the movies because, like, so, you know, I watch a lot of fucking bullshit every year, but like, I don't know. I feel like I want to do worst of videos with you in years that actually are good.
Right.
So those lists would be like more interesting.
Right,
I
yeah,
don't
because
know.
this year it's just like there was just so many to pick from, and half of them I didn't even end up watching because
Yeah.
I'm like I know this is gonna be shit from the trailer. Like, why am I gonna go out of my way to watch it versus something that like
Yeah.
could look interesting or have potential, and then just ends up completely shitting the bed? And like I'm really hard to remember when the last time it was that we had something like that. It's been a while. Because everything we've had for the last couple of years has kind of just been like straight up.
You guys would
bad.
argue 2019. Like everyone, like a lot of people say 2019 is a great year, but I think that's another example of a year that got better as the year went on, especially in the fall, like especially around like October when we saw Uncut Gems. But like, yeah, like that year had like 3, maybe 4 movies that I would call like modern classics. Which maybe that is a good year, a great year for some people, but I still don't. I wouldn't put it in the same sentence as like a 2014 or a 2013 or a 2010. Actually,
Yeah. Well, it's because if you measure the dip started after 2015, and because
Yes.
we've noticed it every
Definitely.
single year for the last like 10 years now. The dip started in 2016,
Yeah.
and then it kept progressively getting worse. And you're right, because as much as I'd praise 2019, and I have praised 2019 as being a great year, again, all the great movies that year came out in the last quarter of that year.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's been a
Most of
trend.
them,
Yeah, and that's been a trend that, for 2020, where it was just we were lucky with what we could get. That's been, I feel like, a continuing trend. Now, what I will say is I feel like the relative quality, specifically in that last quarter of the year, has seen a slight uptick for the last couple of years. But again, it's been so confined to certain pockets of the year. And I feel like, again, we have to sit through so much bullshit just to be able to get the good. The one positive note that I will say about 2024 that I can safely say I did not get in 2023 and 2022 were the surprises. Because I will say, the thing that I feel like, with the exception of a couple entries on my top 10, a lot of them were surprises. Like, did not see The Substance coming. Did not see, like, I had a feeling Anora was going to be good just based off Sean Baker's track record, but, like, how that was just, like, the encapsulation of his entire body of work. Nosferatu, I'll admit, I was a little bit skeptical after The Northman, which I was not a fan of. And also some animated entries that made it onto my list. And I was like, wow, I knew I was going to like these, but I wasn't expecting to like these as much as I thought as I did. So
I agree with that for animation too.
Yeah. I just want to say I think this year is a little bit better than last year. Just a little bit. Just in terms of like the difference in like there's more of like a variety this year and like in terms of like interesting, well-made movies. I like my top 3 of this year, top 5 actually, really, are really unique, and in other years I just feel like just would get lost in the shuffle maybe. But I don't know. I just feel like this year was a little bit more impressive in terms of like screenplays, the original screenplays at least.
Yeah, like I said, it's the variety of movies this year were more. I feel like we're more interesting versus last year. It felt like we were getting inundated with like a lot, and a lot of it was really good. Like there was a lot of stuff last year that I really, really enjoyed, and there was just the fact that I felt like we were getting so much from so many great directors who, that's the other thing also about 2023 as a year, was that we had so many of like the best of the best director-wise just contributing some of their absolute best. And we didn't have that this year, partially because, again, it was both the strike year and the fact that it was an in-between year. It's what I call, we get those sometimes where it's like we get these in-between years where it's like, filmmakers are like on pause, or certain ones are, and usually this is where in previous years we would get a lot of new talent. We didn't really get that this year, I would say. Not a whole lot of like, big new breakouts, I would say, with the exception of like a few. A lot of them, this was really the year that like I feel like a lot of directors who had been working consistently for the last couple of years really kind of hit their peak and their full point of maturation. You know, like I said, the interesting thing about Sean Baker and Brady Corbett being the two front runners for Best Director is that we've been following those guys for the course of 10 years, some longer, you know, depending on when the first time you saw Brady Corbett in a movie was, because he acted before he was directing. You know, and it depends on if you were familiar with Sean Baker's work before he kind of blew up with Tangerine Florida Project. But like that's kind of to me what I'm gonna take away from this year is that. Chris, you got anything else to say before we get started?
Yeah, I was gonna say I agree with different things that both of you said. I understand where you're coming from with how Dustin, how you were saying that this just this whole decade in general, like just in terms of the quality of film, it's definitely been a downgrade from a lot of the great years in the first half of the 2010s. Similarly to how you rate and rank films in your list, a lot of films, I should say, a lot of films in my top 10 list of the 2010s, I give 9, if not 10, if not even 11 or 12, 10 out of 10s. You know, it'd be rare to have a movie that's a 9.5 out of 10 on my lists. And this decade has been consistent for me every year in that I've given approximately 3 films, and no more than 3 films a 10. Except for 2022, I only gave 2 films a 10, and one of them I bumped after a rewatch. My favorite movie that year is Everything Everywhere All at Once. My second favorite movie that year is Babylon. I rewatched Babylon recently, and I bumped that to a 10. I think that film is amazing. But with so many movies, I've noticed just from this decade, they even like the great ones, there's just kind of like little flaws or little just things that don't feel as complete as a lot of the masterpieces that we got in the 2010s. Yet I do agree with what you're saying, Dominic, and you touched on this a little bit too, Dustin, in that I think this year, even if I agree that it is a disappointing year, as pretty much every year of this decade thus far and for film has been disappointing, I do think that it's an interesting year for movies. Like, there's a lot of films that, you know, love them or hate them, I think make some interesting swings. You know, a film like Queer, for example, like just the fact that movie was made for $48 million and it's just Luca Guadagnino just basically telling like a very surreal story about William S. Burroughs that touches on themes of like sexuality and addiction and other things for $48 million is kind of insane. You know, Megalopolis is another, I think, very interesting, just sort of big swing. But it's also worth noting that, you know, those movies, among others that we've loved or, you know, did terribly at the box office, it seems like a lot of, like, there's kind of like a bit of a disconnect in terms of the way that a lot of movie studios promote their films and how audiences respond to them, which in and of itself, I think is very depressing and very sad because, you know, I mean, I think we all can agree here that art that is challenging and innovative is always something that's a sight to behold, even if it always doesn't work. You know, I think we all of us, even regardless of our opinions in movies, even if they're not the same, I think we all appreciate movies that take big risks. And it's sad that audiences don't feel the same. But I think this year, in that sense, was interesting. I think there are a lot of movies that were very unique, even if all of them don't necessarily work. But I do agree with the consensus you both share about this being ultimately a disappointing year for movies.
Yeah, so, and also since this marks the halfway point of the decade, I guess the real question is going to be over the course of the next 5 years will these next 5 years be able to pick up the slack? Because obviously, looking back, you could argue, these last 5 years you could attribute to COVID and the strikes and all that.
Sure.
But I'm not going to go that far because, like we've all been saying, the dip was happening before 2020. So I'm not going to go so far as to blame it on those two. So really, now that, again, we're 5 years past COVID, we're about 2 years past the strike. So let's hope that we could that Hollywood could start to pick up the slack a little bit, that they've hopefully learned the right lessons. We say that every year, and then of course we always have problems with it. And ultimately, it's just a testament to the fact that we are getting older, and shit's just not going to be as cool or engaging to us as we get older.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, that's the other thing that fucking critics never talk about or bring up, is the fact that ultimately every single critic is always going to base their enjoyment of a movie on the things that had the most impact on them growing up during their most impressionable phase, right?
Right.
And that's always the thing that people never seem to bring up whenever they're critiquing a movie, per se, is the fact that obviously overall audience changes, audience tastes change over time, right? And ultimately you comparing something that was very impressionable to you getting older, growing up, versus something now as an adult is going to be something different. So that's kind of the thing that I always want to bring up, because that's something that no other critic will do, is the fact that there's always people who say, oh, there's never any bias. That's bullshit. We all know there's always going to be some bias going in there. So just to kind of be more so aware of that as we continue to do this year in and year out.
My eyes have been opened wide as of late when it comes to that kind of thought process. All criticism is bias.
Yes.
All of it. All of it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're telling what you think about something.
Exactly.
Why does it have to be an offense on someone's soul? I've been guilty of this too. I've been angry about other people's opinions because it's just retarded how they think sometimes. But
So
I don't. But it's just things are different when you talk about Tim Allen and Conclave with some people. I don't know.
Oh man, and how that's not that great of a movie. Anyways,
I have no knowledge at all about the technical aspect of filmmaking at all whatsoever. So
I don't know. I think
giving
Tim
my
Allen has a
opinion.
pretty comparable filmography to Robin Williams.
all right, let's get to these lists because it's late.
Sure.
All right, honorable mentions that we want to rattle off. Chris, go, then Dustin, then me.
All right. I'll do 10 honorable mentions just really, really quickly. A Different Man, Real Pain, Bird. No, actually, I messed it up. Different Man, Real Pain, Better Man, Bird, Challengers, Dune Part 2, Exhibiting Forgiveness, Flo, His Three Daughters, Queer. Those are my 10 honorable mentions.
Nice.
I think that just kind of goes back to what I was saying about how I think that there's just been some really truly unique cinema this year. Flo, for example, being a silent animated movie that relies it is told strictly from the POV of a bunch of animals finding each other and befriending one another in a post-apocalyptic time. Has one of the best scores of the year. I think that movie's just wonderful and really, really lovely. Different Man, I think, has an amazing performance at its helm. One of two amazing performances this year from Sebastian Stan. He's really terrific here. You have Better Man, which is a great atypical music biopic about Robbie Williams, played by a CGI monkey who's really voiced by John O'Davies, who gives one of the best voice performances of the year. He's terrific. Challengers, I loved. Dune Part 2, I thought was great. His Three Daughters, Natasha Lyonne, one of my very favorite performances of the year. She should be sweeping the Best Supporting Actress category. It's, I'd say, one of the top 5 performances of the year. She's amazing here. And Bird, I thought, was a really lovely experiment from Andre Arnold. Exhibiting Forgiveness, I thought, was a very just beautiful, cathartic movie about dealing with childhood trauma. Queer, I really, really enjoyed because of Daniel Craig's performance, especially, and just the filmmaking. Real Pain has an amazing lead performance from Kieran Culkin, and it's just it's a big step in the right direction for Jesse Eisenberg. I didn't mind his first movie, When You're Finished Saving the World, but I just thought in terms of his skills as a writer, he really just brought his A game here. It was a really wonderful, just really lovely, just sort of family comedy drama that also felt kind of atypical and daring, just very, very good, and just very realistic, and just it was really, really good. Uh, yeah, I think I covered all of them. But
All right.
yeah, so those are my honorable mentions.
Nice. Dustin, honorable mentions.
20, juror number 2. Clint Still Got It. Rebel Ridge, number 19. Mid-size sedan is a star.
Yes, sir.
18, Strange Darling, Giovanni Ribisi behind the cami. 17, Megalopolis, Yeg. 16, The Order, Justin Kurzel, Yeg. 15, A Complete Unknown, very good. Better than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Great musical sequences, really good cast. 14, The Bike Riders, Jeff Nichols' best movie, in my opinion. Great ensemble, good period piece, good stuff. 13, Best International Movie of the Year, Kill. India coming through with Kill. Fucking badass. That's better than the last 3 John Wicks. Okay, hot take. 12, Love Lies Bleeding. Hell yeah. Kristen Stewart, gay, straight, bring her on. 11, Joker Folia 2. Folia Yeg. More like it. Todd Phillips is the man. If you don't like this movie, good. All right, those are my honorables.
All right.
Thanks.
Now for me, I got 20, Juror Number 2, 19, Deadpool and Wolverine, 18, A Different Man, 17, Saturday Night, 16, Furiosa, 15, Hundreds of Beavers, 14, Trap, 13, The Fall Guy, 12, The Order, 11, Sing Sing. That's what I got. There's also a lot of stuff that I have not seen yet. Have not seen His Three Daughters, or rather I started it and I never finished it. A bunch of others that I wanted to see as well. Late Night with the Devil, I didn't see. Yeah, there are. I'll admit there are a couple that I had to miss as well. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Dustin had to step out for a second, so Chris, let's get started with your number 10. What do you got?
All right, my number 10 of the year is Sean Wang's Dee Dee. I watched this back in January during Digital Sundance, and when I first heard about this, I was very curious about it. Coming of age dramas, especially like from like an indie studio, are kind of my bread and butter. I've loved many of them from just especially over the last, like, I'd say couple decades. 8th Grade, that I loved, mid-90s, I thought was fantastic, just to name a couple. But what I think is really works about this film is that it puts you back into the time period of the mid-2000s in a way that encapsulates those feelings of, not really understanding, like, social skills, or like how to deal with like people on the internet in a way that is very like relatable, and I think it just speaks a lot to like the American experience. But what I think is so cool about like Sean Wang's direction here is that he just has just such a good focus on like the tone, and I think balances comedy and drama very well, and it makes for a movie that I think catches you by surprise, because the first hour of it is very charming, very light, even though it has these moments of like great like broad comedy, and isn't afraid to be a little edgy here and there in a way that fits with the tone. But by the third act, I think this story becomes a lot more poignant and a lot more emotionally resonant in a way that we don't really see in coming of age dramas. It's not in coming of age comedy dramas. It's not afraid to show the deep flaws of its protagonist in a way that doesn't paint him as being unlikable, but just simply paints him as being like a human growing kid. I think Isaac Wang carries the movie beautifully. I think it's a great breakout performance. And Joan Chen really should be nominating the best supporting actress. Just a campaign. She gives one of the best supporting performances of the year. She's really, really terrific here. Fuck Amelia Perez. Zoe Saldana should not be winning. And Selena Gomez should not by any means be nominated anywhere for that.
Penis to vagina.
Yeah.
Vagino plastico.
But Joan Chen gives a really lovely, warm performance here. Has just some very heartfelt moments, and I just think it's a great movie. It's very well directed, very well edited too. I might add, and yeah, I loved it.
All right, that was your number 10. All right, Dustin, what do you got? Number 10.
All right, my number 10 is Dee Dee.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. So you're basically just about to reiterate everything that he just said. Cool, that
Yeah.
worked out.
Yeah.
That worked out well.
Dee Dee was good because but it was deceptive because the first 15 minutes are like hysterical. And then it just like it eases you into like kind of like a mid-90s kind of ripoff. And like even though that those plot beats are similar, the acting is stupendous throughout. Specifically, Joan Chen, like Chris said, does deserve the supporting actress campaign, a better one at that. And it won the audience award. I called it as soon as I read the synopsis and everything and like saw a clip of the movie. I was like, yeah, this is going to be an audience winner. And I was so glad that I saw this on virtual Sundance as well. And it was one of the it's definitely the best debut of this year. I would say it was the best directorial debut.
I'll give it that. I'll give it that. For me, the reason why it didn't make my top 10 or honorable mentions is because, again, I saw it and I'm like, I saw this already. It's mid-90s. I get it. It's a decade later. It's in the 2000s. I get how that's relatable. I'm like, but it's mid-90s except with a less likable lead and a mother figure who has more screen time and is actually like a real character. And I'm like, I almost wish that this movie had been about the mom, not about the kid.
Because slightly different tone, though.
Slightly different, but overall, yeah, it was a lot more. It was a lot more funny. But like, there were certain sequences that literally felt like they were just ripped out of mid-90s, like to an egregious point for me.
In the second act, I do agree with that. Just in terms of like when that like plot, kicks the story in when he finds like the skater kids. I guess for me, and I'm not trying to dismiss your argument or anything, but I think for me, what separates from that, and without spoiling anything for anyone who's watching who hasn't seen Dee Dee, is what the movie does with that storyline in the third act and how it kind of subverts that.
Sure.
In a way that I think, I guess for me, I thought was like very, I thought like it brought the movie together for me, as I kind of mentioned earlier, but I get where you're coming from.
Sure, yeah, and all that does is add more fuel to my fire. The argument is you're like, because you're right, I do like the direction that goes. That did take a turn that I wasn't expecting, and it just makes me wish, and I'm like, man, I wish this could have been about the mom, because she's such a more interesting and more sympathetic character than this piece of shit kid. All right, so going on to my number 10, queer. I have this phrase where every time Luca makes a batshit weird movie, it's guaranteed to make my top 10 of the year. Because Suspiria made my top 10, Bones and All made my top 10, and now Queer made my top 10. Yeah, so basically my journey with Luca starts with Call Me By Your Name, which I will admit was a little bit of an overhyped movie. Possibly a precursor to the Armie Hammer being a cannibal arc. Who knows? But, the way that, yeah. But, then 1 year later, I saw Suspiria, and I'm like, what the fuck was this? This is one of the greatest things I've ever seen. I'm still not quite sure if what I watched was, like, good, but it was just so batshit and out there and crazy. And while I will say that this is probably the most, sane of his insane movies, it's not about cannibals or witches or anything like that. It's just about a dude going through, good morning, Luke, to you as well. It's just about, what's it called? It's just about, again, it's supposed to be William S. Burroughs, even though it's not really. Just basically boozing his way through Mexico City, picking up different young lads to sleep with. It's literally like the anti-James Bond movie, James Bond, where it's almost like, if James Bond just retired and just got hooked on heroin and was extremely, extremely gay. And he hooks up with Drew Starkey from Outer Banks.
James Bond?
James Bond, exactly. Oh man, but he hooks up with Drew Starkey. They have some adventures. You don't know if Drew Starkey's like leading him on and it's like, oh, like I'm into you or not, or this is just all just one big game. They go on adventures together, and eventually he fucking and the whole time he's like trying to discover like a means of telepathy, or at least that's what he says he's looking for. In reality, he's just looking for like the craziest drug trip of all time. And this is one of those movies where when I got out of it, like kind of, again, the thing about like each one of these top 10 movies is that they have to be like an experience for me. They have to like bring something out of me. They have to make me feel something. And in this case, I literally left this movie after the most insane ayahuasca trip I'd ever experienced. I'm like, oh man, like I've never done ayahuasca, but I felt like I was in there with them when they're literally vomiting up their hearts. I'm like, oh shit, like we're in for it now. And then I realized in hindsight, I'm like, oh yeah, they just totally ripped off 2001: A Space Odyssey. But it didn't matter because it was awesome. I had an absolute blast with this movie. It was so much fun. I literally came out of it feeling that like I had just undergone a transformative experience, especially, you know, giving him literally watch him waste his life away at the end. And it's like, I don't know if we were supposed to take something from this, but man, what a hell of a ride that was. And if that's the one thing you take away from this movie to make sure that, you know, life is not, does not have any wasted moments, that you have as much fun and go on as big of an adventure as you can, then sure, I'll take that. So yeah, Queer, my number 10. Chris, what's your number 9?
All right, so my number 9 of the year is Saturday Night. I'll preface with this: I'm a big fan of Jason Reitman. I always have been, as you know, Dustin knows. Loved his movies since I was a kid. He was one of the filmmakers that I would say helped me. I think look at things from a more critical lens, as I had mentioned earlier. You know, Thank You for Smoking, Juno, Up in the Air, amazing movies. Up in the Air especially is brilliant. And then 2011 he made Young Adult, which was a bit of a departure for him in the sense that there was a lot more dark comedy and in his story, and it was I think all three of his first three films, as raw and honest as they can be, there's things in them, like ultimately they're very hopeful films. Like I would say, like even Up in the Air, like as sad as that movie gets, I do think there is something really like oddly heartfelt and hopeful about it. With Young Adult, it was completely different because it showed his range as a director, and he knocked it out of the park there. Charlize Theron's amazing. Then cut to 2014. I'm not going to talk about Labor Day. I never watched all of it. I kind of refuse to. Men, Women, and Children comes out, gets a 33%, I want to say, in Rotten Tomatoes. The film that's deeply hated, and it's one of my favorite films of all time. It not only is it my favorite Jason Reitman film, but it sits comfortably in my top 30 favorite films of all time. And everything he made after that, you know, Tully and The Front Runner, and Ghostbusters Afterlife, I thought were all different extensions of good, different variations of good. But I was waiting for him to just sort of make a movie that showed that same sort of like raw, like versatile, like energy that he had on display throughout his early career, and that continued to evolve with films like Young Adult, Men, Women, and Children. What I think works so well about Saturday Night is from the very beginning, it's very apparent that he did his research and he studied his history into the makings of you know, this iconic show. And while not all details of it are necessarily fleshed out or touched upon perfectly, he really captures the spirit of that time in a way that feels timeless. He assembled what I think might be probably the best ensemble cast of the year, just by virtue of these actors just giving such like seamless performances, capturing, you know, their real life counterparts. You know, you have Lamorne Morris as Garrett Morris, who's amazing in this film. Gabriel LaBelle in the lead as Lorne Michaels, giving another performance that shows his range as an actor, as an emerging actor. He's terrific here. And then people like Cooper Hoffman, Matt Wood, Corey Michael Smith, Tommy Dewey, many actors just show up and bring so much to this film in a way that just reminds you of how special the filmmaker Jason Reitman is. I think this has some of the very best editing of the year. I think it's beautifully written. It has a terrific script that should be in the conversation for best original screenplay. And all in all, it's just a very kinetic, just deeply energetic force of the film that, it manages to be a crowd pleaser in so many ways. And it's just so satisfying to watch from beginning to end. So many hysterical moments. Tommy Dewey is hilarious here. He has some amazing moments. And then just so many moments where he lets these actors just about all of them have their moments to shine. And it's great. I loved Saturday Night. And this was the film, I'd say, from Jason Reitman in terms of quality that I've wanted to see for quite some time, quite literally about 10 years now. And it's good to have him back. I'm sad this movie underperformed at the box office, but it's truly something special, and I'm sad it hasn't been doing well in terms of showing up in awards, getting awards recognition, because it's a great movie.
Yeah. And I do want to preface and say that I did still very, very much enjoy this movie, even though it is not in my top 10. I did have a really, really good time doing this, especially given that I do not have the same level of attachment to Saturday Night Live that you guys do.
Sure.
All right, Dustin, what's your number 9?
Better Man.
Wow.
Now,
So that made
you're talking about surprises, right?
Yeah.
This is a fucking surprise. I wasn't expecting this to be in my top 10. You kidding me? No. Yeah, a pop star I know one song by from Britain playing a fucking monkey in a biopic directed by the guy who did The Greatest Showman, a movie where every time I did a check for that when I worked at the movies, I wanted to die. It's like, how am I going to like this movie? I like this movie a lot. It's one of the most well-made, beautifully rendered films I've seen this year in terms of scope, visual scope, and it takes the biopic formula and turns it on its head a little bit. No, even beyond the monkey shit. This is the kind of movie Rocket Man and Bohemian Rhapsody wish they were, because it fleshes out the character. He doesn't become instantly famous in the first 15 minutes. He actually it actually has great pacing. And while there was some performances in this I would have liked to see more of, Damon Harriman playing his manager, for the boy band, he was terrific. I do think this was a fantastic film for what it was going for. It's very, very good, and I think it's going to benefit from rewatches as well. And I think John O'Davies was exceptional with his. I think he did all the motion capture for it. I'm pretty sure, but Robbie Williams is very likable. Comes across as very likable, and his music is pretty good. So I like the soundtrack. Looked good. Really, really entertaining. Biggest surprise of the year. Better Man.
Dustin, so I know that they said that the reason as to why he made himself a CGI monkey was because he always saw himself as lesser evolved. But did they ever acknowledge in the movie that oh, you're a monkey? It's just interacting and sing with it. They never do that.
No,
they never once acknowledge that.
It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor.
I know that it's a metaphor, but still, that's the sort of shit that just fucks with my head, nonstop. Even if it's totally metaphorical.
If you know it's a metaphor, then you shouldn't be surprised that.
Well, for example, right? If they were, for example, right? If they were to cut to a perspective of the other characters and they saw him as human, but he sees himself as the monkey, I don't know. That's just the sort of thing where it's a little bit.
He's the monkey from frame 1.
Yeah, no, that would mess with my head too much. I would that's just how my brain works. I would just constantly be why a monkey? I don't get it.
You sent me that, and then a few weeks later, I saw that the director came up with that idea.
Really?
That Michael Gracie brought the idea to Robbie Williams, and Robbie Williams was like, "What?"
Okay. So it wasn't even
heard.
Robin Williams' idea. That's even crazier.
Yeah, Robin Williams.
He's,
oh yes, I'm a better man. Yes.
Oh yes.
Ooh.
That would even make more sense if it was Robin Williams. Like that would make total sense.
Oh yes. Let me entertain you. Yes.
I'll just say something really quick to add to Dustin's point about that, though, because it's, it was in my honorable mentions, very close to my top 10, probably like my number 12 of the year, I would say. I saw it with my friend Sam, who he also voted in NIFA, and he really, really enjoyed it, but he kind of had that same sort of like, he pretty much had the same issue that you think, Dominic, that you're going to take with it, even though he thought it was like a really good movie. What I'll say about it is because of how I think well-defined of a character Robbie Williams is in this movie, it's something that just doesn't really, it never really bothered me. I mean, there's maybe one scene I will say where it feels just a little goofy, and maybe you'll agree with me on this, Dustin. That's the final, like, kind of just musical number. It just like the very last musical number in the movie where he sings "My Way." I think in that scene,
I like that it tied back to that.
I like that it tied back to it too. I just think like it looks a little silly, like in that scene, just with the suit and everything. I think it's a poignant scene. Like I don't think it's like not a bad scene or anything like that.
No, I thought that was nice.
Yeah.
Disagree.
No,
better man. Number 9.
See, for me, I wouldn't be able to get past just like the idea of it's like two humans giving birth to a monkey. It's like I get it, it's a metaphor, but like,
oh my god,
I know, but you know what I'm saying. Oh man! All right, my number 9, Transformers 1. Yeah, it made the top 10. No, I don't care. Yes, I love Transformers. Fuck you. I love Transformers. The Michael Bay movies are masterpieces. And for them to essentially be like, see, it's funny that you were talking about Better Man as far as being the surprise of the year. This is the surprise of the year for me because these trailers were fucking dog shit. Some of the absolute... Well, okay, listen. In terms of the sense of like me going from being like, wow, these are some of the worst trailers I've ever seen, even though the animation looked cool, like those trailers were so bad that I'm like, wait, like people are saying that like the Michael Bay movies are going to be worse than this. And then for me to not only like it, but love it, where essentially you've got like an X-Men First Class origin story for the characters of Optimus Prime and Megatron that somehow like works and actually and even though it completely changes the Transformers chronology, like it gives you a lot of surprise pathos that I wasn't expecting like at all, where you actually like start off with them as like these low down minor bots who are just struggling for like a bit of attention, trying to learn more about like the history of their race in Cybertron while they're in the middle of this war supposedly with the Quintessons. And then
Chris Hemsworth plays Optimus.
Yes,
right?
he does. Yes, Chris Hemsworth is Optimus Prime. Brian Tyree Henry is Megatron.
How is he supposed to be Peter Cullen or whatever?
Well, so I'm glad that you bring that up because they do this thing where they basically have them at the beginning, both of them too, I'll say, where they're kind of very jokey and they're very quippy and, you know, they're constantly like nothing is taken serious, and Prime is seen as this kind of you know, he's like, they're like, you're always rebelling, you're always creating problems for the rest of us, you know? And he's like, I just want to like do my part, and like we have to be made for more than just, you know, being minors and such. And throughout the course of the movie, as they kind of hit their next evolution, their transformations, if you will, as they discover the truth as far as how they've been lied to, and how that drives them apart ultimately, because they both are like very understandably betrayed, but Megatron just takes it one step too far. And by the time they like become the versions of Optimus and Megatron, it's very subtle how their performances change over the course of the movie.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
But by the time they end up, like Hemsworth is not at all doing an impression of Cullen, but by the time it ends, you're like, okay, like I kind of see how he's become Optimus Prime. And the same with Brian Tyree Henry, who gives one of the best voiceover performances of the year. Like when he when he takes the one T-Cog and puts it in his chest and becomes like Megatron at the end, and he has the famous "I am Megatron" line, and the fact that there is almost like no like additional effects that are put on, that's just the power of Henry's performance. Like that shit like set goosebumps up the back of my neck. That's how fucking good it was. On top of the fact that it is stellarly animated. It's directed by Josh Cooley, who directed my least favorite Toy Story 4. But
Good.
I will say the animation is off the charts good. Like there's a sequence in the beginning where they're taking part in what's called the Iacon 500, which is essentially this massive race, but like it's Transformers, so like there's all these different obstacles and they're constantly transforming throughout it. It's one of the most like stellar sequences I've ever seen. It gives the race sequence at the beginning of Ready Player One a run for its money on a visual standpoint. And yeah, it's on the list partially because of the Transformers bias. But notice again, Rise of the Beasts and any of the other Transformers movies that have been released in the past, none of them have ever made my top 10. None of them. Not one.
Better years.
Better years, yes. But, so, it's the Transformers bias combined with the fact that this surprised me in terms of, again, I thought this was going to absolutely suck. And not only did it end up being good, but it actually ended up being really fucking good. And I came out of it being like, wow, I was not expecting that. So that's why it's on the list. Number 9. Chris, what do you got for number 8?
Right. My number 8 of the year is Sing Sing. I don't have a lot to add to this that hasn't already been stated by, like a lot of its biggest fans. It was wasn't necessarily a big hit at the box office, but it was a film that premiered at TIFF in September 2023 and garnered like a lot of critical attention and hype since then. And for what it is, it's an excellent prison drama. Greg Quedar, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I could be wrong. I think his direction here is really, really wonderful, and I think that the story just captures like the heart of these characters, or I should say subjects, with a lot of humanity, with a lot of depth, and it's a film that I think at its core is about rehabilitation and just finding cathartic ways to be a better version of yourself, I'd say like more so finding ways to just sort of like escape the demons, if you will, and things that bring you down. And I think when it comes to that, I think this movie really, really works. Coleman Domingo gives his best performance thus yet. He is amazing in this film and deserves all of the attention he's gotten. I'm rooting for him to get a Best Actor nomination. Seems pretty obvious he will, and I mean, it's going to happen. He's amazing here. Really good ensemble. I think everyone in the supporting cast works very, very well here, even though a lot of them are playing, just like essentially versions of themselves. Clarence Macklin is very good here. Sean San Jose, I think it gave a performance that I think got very slept on. I think he's wonderful in this film. Sean Dino Johnson, great ensemble, and it's beautifully shot. It has that kind of that sort of like cinematography that's very evocative of prison dramas you'd see in like the I'd say like late 70s or early 80s, that kind of thing. Films like Papillon, Midnight Express, things like that. It's a wonderful movie. It's one of my favorite movies of the year. Number 8.
Hot take: Sean San Jose should have been getting the supporting actor attention that Clarence Macklin's been getting.
Agreed 100%. Yeah, I agree. I think Clarence Macklin's like, I think it's a really, really good performance. Don't get me wrong, like he's damn good in the movie.
He peaked at his first
Dustin,
scene.
you called it. Yeah, peaked at the first. What? Yeah.
When he's intimidating Johnny Simmons.
Yes.
That's
Who I didn't even recognize that's Johnny Simmons. That was insane.
It's crazy.
It took me a second to be like, oh my god, that's Johnny Simmons.
Yeah, that was wild. Wow. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was a long time ago. All right,
Punched
Dustin.
the highlights out of her hair.
You punched the highlights out of her hair. Dustin, what's your number 8?
People used to call me Johnny Simmons. It was weird when
Ugh.
Jennifer's Body came out.
You don't look anything like him. Like anything.
That's what I was saying. Tell that to the girls at the bus stop. I don't know what to tell you. Number 8, The Substance.
All right.
Woo.
Let's go.
On the outset, is it really a Dusty movie? I don't know. Put Demi Moore in it, anything's a Dusty movie. I fucking love her. I'd ask her out now. You know what I mean? But like, I love Demi Moore in this movie. Margaret Qualley's looking better than anything. But the Brutalist is getting shit for the AI and everything. They definitely used AI.
Oh yeah.
To enhance Margaret Qualley doesn't look. I saw set photos of her on this movie. They did something to her because she looks better than she's ever had or ever will in this movie. But like, it's very well written. It's very simple, and it's not a dialogue-driven movie.
No, it is not.
But it's brilliantly directed. And the Demi Moore scene that everyone's talking about, and her in the mirror trying to prepare for that date with that dorky guy that she knew from high school, like that's one of the best scenes of the year. Like that's probably a top 5 scene of the year. Yeah. So I can't deny that, a spot in my top 10 just because Demi Moore really drives it home. I think the last 20 minutes gets a little too crazy and goes a little too far into the metaphor, I think, but the ending itself, I feel like it was a great wrap around and like a good like tie into the beginning. And I always like endings like that if they really land them. And I like the story and characters in between, and I think it nailed it. So The Substance is my number 8.
Fuck yeah. Really happy that made it onto your list. My number 8, The Apprentice. The best, I would say, statement, explanation, examination of how people become evil. Like, I think this is one of the best instances of showing, forget that this is a movie about Trump, right? Just take that out of the equation, right? This is one of the best instances I've ever seen of how people become evil over time. Nobody's born evil, They may have some intentions that can be exploited and corruptible over time, but nobody's ever born evil. Like the version of Trump that we're watching in this movie at the beginning, portrayed by Sebastian Stan, it's just somebody who's looking to show off and be somebody in New York City. Like, I know 15 guys that are like that, Like, now, obviously, you place him under the influence of the devil himself, in this case, Jeremy Strong's masterclass performance as Roy Cohn, the best version of Roy Cohn that I've ever seen in anything on screen. And this is, again, following up fucking Al Pacino, who played him in Angels in America, the miniseries. Strong blows him out of the fucking water, just in his kind of ode to Kendall Roy, if you will, that is just so much more magnanimous, so much more dead-eyed. I'm like, so in my mind, Strong's performance in this movie is, I'm like, oh, this is Kendall. What would have happened if Kendall had gotten Logan's position? He would just become so soul-suckingly evil that you just can't see any of the humanity left in him. To the point where, again, you almost see this transference happen. It's a couple different points, right? The first point being when Trump and Cohn succeed in getting the loan, which Trump's dad was fully not expecting him to. And after that, you slowly start to see Trump's dad, like, wither away and lose his memory in front of him. And the other instance is right at the halfway point when Trump really starts to become something and he really starts to evolve into the Trump that we know. And you just start to see Cohn just wither away as the AIDS starts to get the better of him. Like the scene between the two of them when Cohn comes to confront him about Trump kicking his boyfriend out of the Hyatt. I was like, masterful work. This is what I want in my movie. Sebastian Stan in this movie, the thing that I love about him is that he's not doing a Trump impression. It seems like he is, but he's not. It's just the fact of, again, we're coming off of, again, Trump has been the most public figure for the last 8 years. So it's pretty hard to not have a really good basis for his mannerisms and such, but it's just it's the lips and the hand movements and the constant repetition. Like Trump repeats himself all the fucking time. Like, I don't know if that's just a New York thing or that's a him thing. He repeats himself all the fucking time. And Sebastian Stan nails that. And the way that he keeps that really subdued at first, but then increases it as he becomes the caricature Trump that we know by the end. But by that point, he's just completely sinister and evil. Like, and also, Dustin, I know that you have gripes for them not playing the Celebrity Apprentice theme song. I do too, but I will say that how they kind of modeled the look of the movie and specifically the score of the movie after Scarface, it was masterfully done. The funniest thing about this movie is how they released this movie thinking that it would be like, it would convince enough people to not vote for Trump, and then it completely ended up blowing up in their face, where it ended up kind of in a weird way being a pro-Trump thing, where it almost worked, I feel like, in a way that like Wolf of Wall Street did, in terms of it was supposed to be like a message against this guy, but it ended up like causing 1,000 people to like be like, no, I kind of want to be like that guy more. You know, I don't know if that's like exactly the best metaphor, but I think you guys are seeing where I come from. Like I said, it's the fact that this is as good as it was and it's this low on the list shows how much I loved my previous entries. But yeah, number 8, The Apprentice. Chris, number 7.
I'll just say really quick. Yeah, The Apprentice wasn't in my honorable mentions or anything, but I did think it was like a damn good film, and I completely agree with you on the Jeremy Strong performance. Especially, he should be sweeping the best supporting actor race. He's astonishing.
Just like for Succession.
Yes, amazing on Succession. He's a brilliant actor, Jeremy Strong. We all love him on that, and he was amazing here. My number 7 of the year is a film that I think is actually incredibly underrated, because there's people that this was a film that was very, very divisive among, like, you know, just film fans alike. Some people liked this movie, some people thought it was okay, some people hated this movie. I'm one of the only people I know that like straight up love this movie. And it's Yorgos Lanthimos' Kinds of Kindness. I'll say this in general. I love Yorgos Lanthimos. I think he's an amazing filmmaker. I love, I'd say pretty much every movie of his. I think the only one I haven't seen in its entirety is Alps, but I love Dogtooth, love The Lobster, Killing of a Sacred Deer, Poor Things, just all of his movies I think are amazing. I think he's one of the most unique voices that we have in cinema currently. I think he finds a way to really kind of like tap into his own sensibilities with dark comedy and direct his actors in a way that really, really showcases his voice. I think his best film for me is Poor Things. I love Poor Things. It's an amazing film, and it was my favorite movie of 2023. But what I loved about this movie, and it's an imperfect movie, I have nitpicks with it, is even though it's a very oddly structured, albeit loose, anthology story. I think each story in and of themselves, I think, just examines human behavior in a way that, although is admittedly very deeply cynical, fascinating in terms of what Lanthimos is trying to exploring. The first story, you have the Lanthimos examines just sort of like the work kind of dynamic, you know, between like employer and employee with Jesse Plemons and Willem Dafoe, and he creates, I think, like what is a very clever and a very hysterical satire on the relationship between like an employee and an employer, and what it means to sort of like really truly hate the job that you have, but also sort of go out of your way to work hard and to sacrifice parts of yourself for it, because you think you'll be rewarded something that you ultimately may not. The second story, I think, is a very interesting depiction of relationships, and particular relationships that are kind of like sour and, you know, can be toxic, in the sense that the Jesse Plemons character, you know, his Daniel, his wife, Liz, goes missing. She comes back. He's convinced it's not her, and so he puts these weird, increasingly disturbing and distressing things for her to do in order to prove herself to him. And without spoiling where that story goes, ultimately, like, I feel like it satirizes in a very, very dark and depressing way what it means to just sort of give yourself up for a relationship. The third story, examines that with religion, with Emma Stone being in this cult run by Willem Dafoe yet again, and Hong Chow, and in the sense that her and the Jesse Plemons character in that story are looking for someone who can basically have these supernatural abilities, and they basically, the Emma Stone character in particular, just is deeply kind of like looking for that just to prove herself to the cult, and that story becomes a story about the sacrifices that one can make through religion, where they compromise their own identity, their own morals, even to a point where you get blamed for things that are truly not your fault, as her character does. I won't spoil in what way, but I think you know what I'm getting at with the Joe Alwyn stuff in that story. I have issues with this movie, which more so come from the pacing, particularly in the third story. But I think just in terms of Lanthimos, his skills as a writer, I think this is just as entertaining and as fascinating as really any movie he's made. Jesse Plemons is brilliant in this movie. One of my top 3 performances of the year. I think this is his best work thus far. I think in each segment he is able to kind of like tap into the sort of like dark sardonic tone that Lanthimos gives him so seamlessly, while also showing just so much like powerful and at times heartbreaking, devastating range that we haven't seen from him before. The first two stories in particular, the first story, just that scene of him breaking down near the end of that first story when, well, I won't spoil it, but you know what I'm talking about. And just his crying in that scene, I think, is amazing acting. And in the second story, just the way he plays the unhinged, deeply like mentally scarred elements of his character, I think are incredible. I think it's an amazing performance, and I can't wait to see what he does next. I mean, obviously, I know him, Emma Stone, and Yorgos Lanthimos are collaborating in a movie that's coming out this year, a remake of Save the Green Planet. It's called Begonia. I'm very excited for that movie, but I loved Kinds of Kindness. I watched it a couple times, and it's one that I'm excited to just keep revisiting, because I think it's truly wonderful, deeply underrated work from one of our best working actors.
Yeah, really enjoyed this one. I think I found this more interesting to watch than Poor Things, even though I thought Poor Things was the more well-made movie. It's just a case of like all anthology stories. Some of the stories are gonna be better than others. That's ultimately kind of what it comes down to. It's the same with Amores Perros and all the other ones that we've seen like this.
I really want to watch that.
It. That's really good. That one's really, really good. Definitely recommend that. Dustin, you're number 7.
7, His Three Daughters.
All right.
The best Netflix movie of the year, the best Azazel Jacobs movie of the year. So that's an example of a filmmaker at the top of their game. That's not a director I particularly was that big of a fan of. Terry is kind of a shitty independent movie. French Exit was a movie I put off for a while, with a movie where Tracy Letts plays the dead husband who's a cat. The Lucas Hedges, one of the last movies Lucas Hedges was in. But yeah, His Three Daughters. 3 daughters are coming to see their dad right before they died, played by J.O. Sanders, and the daughters are played by Carrie Coon, Natasha Lyonne, and Elizabeth Olsen. 3 people I really want to have sex with, especially Natasha Lyonne, who's amazing in this movie, and Elizabeth Olsen is one of the hottest people of all time. But Jovan Adepo, every movie I see that fucking guy in, I'm just like, he needs to be the next big thing, because he can like transform into anything. Like, he's a little pudgier in this than he was in Babylon. It's like he transforms, like he's a chameleon. Like he's like a British actor who can just disappear into like American accents, like any region. He's brilliant, and I think he deserves a lot more credit. I think it has one of the best screenplays of the year, hands down. These feel like real people, real characters. It's not going for like a gimmicky kind of a tone. It's a real story. And it's a real heartbreaking, at times hilarious drama with some of the best performances of the year. So his three daughters, Netflix, good fucking job.
Awesome. Yeah, I still got to finish this. I made the mistake of watching this while I was high out of my mind at like midnight, and I think I made it like 15 minutes in. Not even. Natasha Lyonne, still don't know where I stand with her. I like the other two. I love Carrie Coon and Elizabeth Olsen, obviously. Natasha Lyonne's one I'm still
You ever saw
kind of
Poker
curious
Face?
on. Nope. Didn't watch Poker Face. For me, I'm still trying to figure out. I'm like, okay, does she have anything other than the accent? Does she
Did
have
you watch
anything
Russian
else?
Doll?
I watched the first episode of Russian Doll, and I'm like, all right,
She's
I
great.
get it.
Oh, fuck you. Okay, move on.
She's,
Go to your
she's
what's
really
your
good in American Pie.
All right, my number 7. Definitely, probably, I guarantee you, I'm gonna have it lower than both of you, but that's only because I like these 6 movies more. The Brutalist. Let's get into it.
Okay.
3.5 hours. It's long, but it is worth every minute. Obviously, again, I was making the joke up until I saw the movie, like, oh, it's a sequel to The Pianist. It's a sequel to The Pianist. Oh, he's a Holocaust survivor. It's a sequel to The Pianist. Like, why do we care? Then I saw it, and I'm like, oh, this is nothing like The Pianist at all. This is not about somebody who survived the Holocaust. This is about somebody who is trying to make a new life for themselves that just gets unabashedly abused and taken advantage of by the rich class. This is the true immigrant story in America. You come here looking for a better life, you get fucked in the ass and used unbelievably so by the rich higher-ups to get what they want from you, and then you get cast out to be forgotten, and you have to make your own way, more than likely retiring back to the place where you came from years ago. I'm being very, very hyperbolic here, but no, this is one of the best of the year. Brady Corbet had one of the most explosive, if you will, directorial debuts. I really gotta stop with this. I'm gonna get myself in trouble. A couple with Vox Lux back in 2018, and he decided to follow that up with a massive epic that is his tribute to the likes of Coppola and Sergio Leone. And once again, it is another story about America. And kind of but more so, I would like to think more so about the tragedies and that helped establish the foundations upon which this country was built upon. Also, low-key, a story about addiction as well, which I think is really, really interesting, because the addiction subplot of this you could almost see as like a throwaway thing in the first half, and you're like, okay, he's a heroin addict, but like, where is this going? And you don't really see until the second half just how that plot line comes back into effect. And when it does, you're like, oh, he's literally using... I'm like, oh, no, this is very, very purposely done here. He is literally using this to block off the pain of all the trauma that he's been dealing with, not just in the past, but in the present. That's a very, very relatable thing, especially since you could make the argument as to how that's how heroin became so prevalent in this country, is used to treat trauma victims, from wars, And so it's one of the few movies that completely justifies its runtime. I would argue of all the 3+ hour long movies, I think this movie justifies its length even more than Oppenheimer, my favorite movie of last year. And again, some of the best performances, Adrian Brody, Felicity Jones. The fact that this is going to be Guy Pearce's first Oscar nomination is still blowing my fucking mind, how I didn't realize that before. Joe Alwyn, who is just perfectly slimy and smarmy in all the best ways. Alessandro Nivola, some truly, truly incredible performance. Also, a fun fact that I found out, Brady Corbet, who is probably going to win Best Director this year, even though now people are realizing, oh, no, he used AI for, like, a couple things to perfect to perfect certain of the architecture and to make sure they perfected the accents.
Which, again, is just a rumor, though.
Right.
From an unreliable source.
Just a rumor from an unreliable source. And even if it's true, who cares? I'm sorry. Like, we know that AI has been being used on films recently. This is not like a new thing that we didn't know. So people need to just get off their high horse as far as how it's being used. I'm pretty sure
Amelia Perez used what they're being rumored to be using, the Brutalist. I'm pretty sure Amelia Perez used AI.
There you go. Like, all of these movies probably used AI in some capacity. Like, I use AI tools all the time for my fucking editing and hashtag tools.
Picture,
exactly. Yeah. Like, it's gonna be used. So people need to get off their high horse about this. Brutalist is awesome. One of the best movies of the year. Really, really glad I saw it. It's funny because you guys know exactly what scene I'm talking about. That scene in the cave. Literally, when that scene happens,
Yeah,
I leaned down to the dude who I was watching with. I was like, oh wow, that's why they called the brutalist. He lost it, but he was also like, he's like, fuck you, like this should not be a joke. But that's just that.
It was
for a second.
crazy in that scene when Adrian Brody screamed out, "Oh!" when he was getting raped.
Oh my god,
All right,
we're
my
all
number
going to
6 of the
hell.
year.
Yeah, you're number
My
6.
number 6
Chris.
of the year is Nosferatu. It's directed by Robert Eggers. Ever since he emerged back in 2016 with The Witch, I've always kind of admired how just his sort of appreciation and attention to detail for the time periods in which his stories are set. I think he's a great director. I really enjoy all of his movies. The Witch I thought was terrific. The Northman I thought was great. The Lighthouse is fantastic. And Nosferatu is no exception. I think that this is above and beyond the best thorough horror film of 2024. I just think like the attention to detail here is one thing, but just his pacing for this movie I think is really works. I think from the moment that this thing starts and we're introduced to like the relationship between Nicholas Hoult and Millie Rose Depp, there's just something so I can't put my finger on it. There's just something just so unique about his approach here that in other kind of like Dracula adaptations, with like the Francis Ford Coppola and like the earlier ones, I think that there's a heart to this movie that isn't found in those films, and I think it's just because of how good Robert Eggers is at making these stories just feel so alive and realistic with his dialogue and with the performances he gets out of his actors. And I think as the film goes on, it just becomes just such a dreamy, haunting nightmare of a film. I have a couple nitpicks with it here and there, but I just thought it was just wonderful from start to finish. Bill Skarsgård, I think, gives his best performance thus far. I think he's amazing here and should be in the best supporting actor conversation. His voice and his transformation as Count Orlok is incredible. And just the cinematography and the directing and the writing even, I think is really all on point here. It's another win from Robert Eggers. And it's one I've seen it twice now. I saw it once, then I saw it again in IMAX, which is amazing in IMAX, just with the color palette and everything. One of my favorites of the year. Yeah.
100%. I'll talk about that more in my top. I just remember the other fact about Brady Corbett that I forgot to talk about. Me and Brady Corbett have the same birthday, which is he is 9 years older than me, just about. So yeah, just a fun little tidbit there. Dustin, you're number 6.
The Apprentice.
Fuck yeah.
Gotta be, man. It'd be in the top 5 if he said you're fired or
money.
Yeah, come on. Why do you gotta rip, dude? You're so on the money with that fucking Scarface shit. That's so true. The score is so reminiscent of wow.
I noticed it immediately, when I started watching it.
First time you're telling me this, though. Like that's a great.
I thought
comparison.
I told you that before.
I didn't hear that. That's a great comparison. That's great. I like that. Good for you. You're hired. But yeah, I love Sebastian Stan. I really think Sebastian Stan is like one of the top 5 actors of his age range. I really do. And I know it sounds like I say that kind of shit a lot, but I really think Sebastian Stan rules. Like the way he transforms into like specifically real people, like going all the way back to I, Tonya, and then following that up with Pam and Tommy, and then now. And like not working with Craig Gillespie this time, which maybe Craig Gillespie would have made a better movie. I don't know. But Ali Abbasi did a terrific job with this material. It could have gone a little bit deeper, I would say. It could have been a little longer, personally. And even though I do think it had the pacing was really, really good for what it was going for, but it could have been a little longer. It could have got away with it, I thought. But one thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention in my review was it features Martin Donovan's best performance. that's an actor I never liked,
Right?
ever. And I think he was kind of perfect as Fred Trump, and he was kind of perfectly used. And the guy that played his brother too was really good. And it has
Yep.
Maria Bakalova's best performance. I mean, yeah, these qualities equal a top 10 movie of the year. And Jeremy Strong gives the best performance of the year, in my opinion. Not just supporting, best performance of the year. Honestly, might be my favorite performance of the decade, but I have to. I don't think that's that crazy because that's how good the way. Like
He's amazing in it.
like
Yeah.
the first half of this movie, the way him and Sebastian Stan are just beautifully acting together. Personally, just the way they're doing that, the movie is navigating on a level other movies are just like pissed off and jealous that they wish they could fucking navigate on the level that those two do in that movie. But yeah, I do think it's great. Like at certain points, it could have been a masterpiece with certain elements besides the "You're Fired" and the theme song, but it was very good, and I'm glad I really liked it.
Yeah.
It's an important movie to watch too.
Especially in the year 2024.
It is important. It
one
shouldn't
of the
be
most
ignored,
important
and
movies.
people want to ignore it and shun it from the conversation. But I'm glad that it's pulling through.
Yeah. All right, my number 6. This is controversial because I guarantee you I'm going to also have this lower than you guys do. Chris, I know I definitely have it lower than you. Anora. Hot take, this is not my favorite Sean Baker movie. I still like Red Rocket a little bit more. But what I'll say about this is his most fully realized and complete feeling movie. Like what I liked about what I saw here is I'm like, oh, this is like an encapsulation of a whole body of work. This is everything I've seen him working with in Tangerine and the Florida Project and Red Rocket, and I'm sure all the movies that he did before Tangerine as well, all to create kind of this modern day Cinderella story, but told in the year 2024. And it's kind of perfect the way that works out, you know, the way that you have just this massive rise and fall where he continues his like obsession with sex workers, but not in like a weird, like perverted sense, and more so just in a sense of like he is just constantly like striving to shine a light on and help people like understand kind of the mentality that it takes in order to pull off this type of job. As I can say this much, it's not an easy job. It's not. You got to have a very, very strong character in order to be able to pull that off and endure that day after day. And where essentially he takes what has happened many times, where again gets involved with this rich son, this rich spoiled little shit of these Russian billionaires who just has his daddy's money and fucks around all day, and everything's going great for a while until reality sets in the form of, as Luke Reviews called them, probably the best description that I've heard for these three that come in: Karen Karagulian, Yura Borisov, and the third guy who's not getting nominated for Oscar, so unfortunately I don't remember his name off the top of my head.
Vasily Tovmasyan.
Thank you, him. Show up, and a sequence of events that proves to be more and more ridiculous as time goes on. But the thing about the second half that's so poignant is there's a realism in the ridiculousness, where it is a series of just continually escalating ridiculous things that are funny to watch, but there's this increasing feeling of, oh, this is the reality constantly knocking through and knocking through and knocking through and knocking through, and it's getting harder and harder and harder, and then at the end the glass just shatters. And she has just lost all sorts of just all her sorts of just like her identity, her stance, her individuality. When she realizes, oh, you're nothing in comparison to these people who are the people who run the world. And the fact that he had the balls to like just put that in your face there, basically like constantly telling you, yes, we know the rich and powerful look down upon us. They think that we are nothing, and they will not hesitate to tell us that to our face if push comes to shove, you know? And the fact that he just so unabashedly went about that to me is really what's going to allow this movie to be one of the best of all time, possibly. So, yeah, Anora, my number 6.
Nice. I'll talk about that later on. But yeah, amazing movie. My number 5 of the year is Adam Elliott's Memoir of a Snail. I was always like very curious about this movie. I believe it first premiered at Cannes Film Festival back in May. And it's Adam Elliott's, his first full-length, feature-length narrative feature since 2009's Mary Max. Amazing movie. I was always like really looking forward to this. This is one of the most beautiful films I have seen this decade thus far. Um, it's an examination of trauma in perhaps maybe the most hopeful way I've seen in a movie. I'd say maybe all decade, in the sense that from early on, when we see everything that happens with Grace and her brother and everything that happens with them and their family, which I won't spoil because I know neither of you have watched the movie yet. Our hearts break for this character because of just how much unspeakable tragedy that's been put upon them. But what I think makes this movie so unique and so special and really pushes it out of being melodramatic or manipulative territory is there's something just so truthful about the direction. I understand that this story was at least semi autobiographical, with some things that like Adam Elliott went through as a kid and like his upbringing and stuff like that. But nothing about it ever feels disingenuous. And as the story progresses, we just, our hearts continue to just break for this character going through trauma after trauma. And I won't say what any of those traumas are because, like I said, I highly recommend this movie and I don't want it to be spoiled for either one of you. But it all culminates to a point where you understand that this movie has just such a deeply cathartic point to it. It's not just about the tragedy that we've been watching like all along, is these terrible things have happened, but it becomes a story about reckoning with said things and learning how to just find peace within yourself and not hate the world for the ways in which it can be ever so scarring. And I know I'm being vague right now about like what that means because I said it several times already. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but it's just such a beautiful, warm movie. It has like a great sense of humor to it that I think just does a great job in terms of like tonal trickery, in terms of it being genuinely really, really funny and in an off-putting way, but not in a way that feels exploitative towards anything that any of the characters have to endure in it. All of the comedy comes from like I think a very honest, somewhat self-deprecating note that I think really, really works for this film's tone. The animation is amazing. Sarah Snook, along with Kieran Culkin and Jeremy Strong, gives the best voice performance of the year, in my opinion. She is amazing here, and just like their respected work in The Apprentice and A Real Pain, it's a performance that really shows her range as an actress and shows that she's someone who cannot just be typecast, to just be to what the Shiv Roy role required of her. In the same way that you saw a lot of range from an incredible amount of range from Jeremy Strong in The Apprentice and Kieran Culkin and what he does in a Real Pain. You fall in love with her instantly in this movie, and her character is just so heartbreaking and so lovable, and it has one of the best original screenplays of the year. It's beautifully written, some of the best dialogue I've heard all year. One of my very favorite endings of the year, and I loved everything about this movie. It's an amazing movie. One of the best films, not only of the year, but I would say of the decade so far. And it did, yeah, I love No More of a Snail. So.
All right, good. Yeah, another one that I am planning on watching At some point, we shall see. Dustin, you're number 5. You muted yourself.
Trap.
Nice. M. Night Shyamalan, baby.
Yeah, this is like the best like popcorn movie of the year, I would say. I really had a good time with this. It was entertaining. It was Shyamalan's most genuinely funny movie maybe ever, and Josh Hartnett was just a perfect lead for this. Like just a brutally ignored performance when it comes to the awards race, us included. So he was amazing in this, and I think it's the most exciting a Shyamalan film has been since Split. And if he doesn't make this into a franchise, it'll age better than Split. So that's my number 5, Trap.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'll say this is probably the most fun theater experience that I had all year. I saw this with 2 friends from school who I don't think had ever seen a Shyamalan movie ever, actually, now that I think about it. And they clearly had no idea what to expect. And watching their reaction to watching everyone else's reaction as we were all just like laughing and being like, oh shit, with all the moment, it was awesome. It was great. Had a blast with this one. All right. My number 5, The Substance. Nice. Yeah, so this was one where, again, I'd heard a lot of good things about this coming out of Cannes. And I was like, okay, I don't really know what to expect, but people were being like, yo, this is one of the craziest movies of the year. And I know I'm a very hyperbolic person when it comes to this stuff, but I have a hard time buying into things when things get hyperbolized like this. So that's why I was skeptical. But then I was very fortunate to be able to see this early. I saw this in July for one of those early screening marketing things. And this is the only one of the movies that I've seen through that research that I've given a complete 5 stars to. Like, I was blown away watching this. Like, this is one of the few movies that I had no idea what to expect going in, knew nothing about, and was not able to predict everything that was happening next, which is almost impossible for a movie to do that for me. Like, okay, like if I don't know what it is going in, I can usually figure out what type of a movie it's going to be and what the trajectory is going to be about 20 to 30 minutes in. 20 to 30 minutes in, once the first shift happens and she shifts it and she transforms into Margaret Qualley, I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Like, and I was kind of able to figure out like the scientific procedure and the back and forth, and obviously again the metaphor where it's like, oh, it's all about like, you know, Hollywood just continuing to exploit you and only wanting your best true younger self, and how that wears on you in order to like maintain these impossible expectations. And Dustin, the ending, I see where you're coming from, but by the time it got to the ending, I was like, oh, now they're just like literally going, fuck it. We're just going for it. And
the third act, you mean.
Yeah.
The ending, what I was saying before about the last shot and like.
Yeah, that last shot was
or the
amazing.
Leading up to the last shot. Like, I thought like it was like, yeah, this is insane, but like you buy into it by that point. And
right.
Like, and just, I like how like it was like it mirrored like the beginning of the movie. Like, when it shows her, without giving spoilers away.
Right.
But yeah, I just like the synchronicity, if that's the right term.
Absolutely. The best thing that I can say about this too is that anybody who was a fan of the practical effects on The Thing is going to love this movie, because this is some of the best gore also and best practical like just mush that I've seen ever in a movie. So definitely not for the
still better. The Thing's still
The Thing's a better movie, obviously, but The Thing's a masterpiece, you know?
No, The Fly is better. I think you're talking about The Fly is better.
Yeah, see, I was talking about The Thing. I've never actually.
The Fly with Jeff Goldblum and David Cronenberg movie.
Yeah, I know the movie.
That's what this reminded me of.
Really?
Oh, definitely. With the body transformation near the end.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. I've never actually seen The Fly, so I can't say.
The Thing is kind of similar too, but like that's like near the end. But
right.
Like The Fly is like that you have. How have you not seen that?
I've never seen it.
Yeah, that's one of the best movies.
You would love that movie.
Yeah, no, it's on my list. Trust me, I know that I've got to watch it. But yeah, in terms of again just using just some absolute like gross out transformations as a metaphor for maintaining impossible body standards it's just awesome, and it's also probably the best feminist movie that I've ever seen too. Also, yeah, easily The Substance. Chris, what's your number 4?
All right, my number 4 of the year is The Brutalist. I'll admit I was actually, this and Memoir of a Snail were interchangeable for me. Memoir of a Snail, like when I did my NIFA nominations, I believe I had listed as my number 4 of the year, or at least my number 4 in my top 10. I swapped them just because I've been thinking about The Brutalist so much. Like you had mentioned earlier, when Brady Corbett in 2018 he dropped Vox Lux, I fell in love with that movie. I think that movie is criminally misunderstood and criminally underrated. It's an amazing film with one of Natalie Portman's best performances, Rafi Cassidy giving one of the best performances of that year. Truly just astonishing filmmaking on all accounts in that film. And the same can be said here, even though this is obviously a much more a much different story than that is. But I think his sort of like cold, just truly harrowing approach to showing just the devastating realities of the characters he's examining, I think is expanded upon even further in this movie, because as you mentioned, it's a story about the immigrant experience, and there's a lot of depth to it. I think Adrian Brody, my vote for the performance of the year. I think, for my money, I think this is the best performance of 2024. Truly staggering work he does here. He is transformative from frame one. He's heartbreaking. He's just it's a powerhouse performance. And alongside him, as you mentioned, you have Guy Pearce, who also gives the best performance of his career as this really slimy, disgusting character that you love to hate, but at the same time is also just so oddly, like, kind of intoxicating in the way that he plays the role. It's a very charismatic performance, very similar to one that I think Philip Seymour Hoffman gave in the Master, in terms of just his scenery chewing and his way of kind of like introducing dry, dark comedy to an unsympathetic character. He's amazing here as well, as is Felicity Jones. But there's a couple things I'm still chewing on in terms of how I feel about them, just in terms of just some stuff in the beginning and one narrative choice in the third act. I'm just not sure how I entirely feel about. But it's a movie that the more I sit with, the more I think about it, the more I think it's just truly mesmerizing work. Brady Corbett, in terms of the best director race, I think will deservedly win the Oscar, and his direction here is amazing. Has some of the best cinematography of the year, and it's just a very powerful movie, and I loved it.
All right, nice. Dustin, you're number 5. Or
My
number 4, sorry.
My number 4, Jesse Eisenberg's A Real Pain.
That is actually also my number 4, so we can talk about it there.
Cool. That's like the first movie from this year that's really stuck with me. I bumped it to a 9, and I think it has one of the best screenplays of the year. And Kieran Culkin's exceptional in this and should be in the leading category. And Jesse Eisenberg is also typically fantastic, as he usually is. But like Chris was saying, this is a step up from his first feature, When You Finish Saving the World. But I didn't hate that movie either. It was just sort of like a typical first feature that was kind of aimless. This definitely had a point, and the pacing was phenomenal. It's just like an 89-minute movie. It looks great. It has some of the most underrated cinematography of the year. I like the Chopin score. I like everything about it almost. The ensemble's great. I like Will Sharp doing a Richard Ayoade impression. Like, that was just great. That was delightful the whole time.
Yeah.
And like Jennifer Grey.
Yeah.
Arguably one of the hottest actresses of the 80s. Love her.
Yeah. Did not recognize her, but either of them in that role. Yeah, the thing that really stuck with me about this movie is that you could argue that there's really no like plot, I guess. I mean, yeah, okay, there's a story, right? As far as like, okay, they have a thing that they're doing, but it's very simple. They're going to Poland in order to try and get in touch with with the roots and such. And
Yeah.
it really is what I call a journeyman's movie, where you were just on the ride with these two as they are kind of, again, these are two cousins who at one point were like brothers, and they haven't seen each other in a long time and have clearly diverged on two very different walks of life. One is kind of just like still struggling, still living in his parents' basement.
Yeah, it sort of has the sensibilities of an Asian movie.
Kind of, yeah. And
Like, where it's like, yeah, it's not like very like action heavy per se, but the dialogue is very engaging, and it's great to look at.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's pointed to that again, that it shows that two of the stars of arguably the two stars of Succession are putting in career best movie work that are both getting a lot of awards attention, rightfully so. And the way that I was talking about with Strong with The Apprentice, and kind of how you see shades of Kendall there, you know, like I said, it's like these are two like Elseworlds alternate personas of their characters in Succession.
Definitely see Roman in this too,
100%,
but
even more so in this than I did with Strong and The Apprentice. But with this,
you could argue though that Kieran Culkin's always been kind of like Roman.
Oh yeah, there's a reason why he works so well for that character, because he's is Roman. Actor. He is Roman. Like, that is him. He has always been kind of the overlooked younger sibling who's constantly striving for attention and validation. Like, come on, that's literally who Kieran Culkin is as a person, you know?
Yeah, he's Robert Downey Jr.
Exactly. So the fact that they're kind of able to marry those two vastly different styles, you know, Kieran's very loose, improvisational, almost genius, almost genius with how simple he makes it look, with Eisenberg's very meticulous, very well crafted, very poignant subject matter. And again, how you're able to marry those two and ultimately come up with like something that's even better than the sum of both parts. It was masterful to me. It really, really was. And I came away like, obviously I was laughing at this movie, but also like when they say goodbye at the end, he's like, I think I'm just gonna hang here for a little bit. You're like, fuck. You're like, I want him to bring him with him and be like, yes, it could be like old time, but it can't, because that's part of the growth and the beauty of this movie. Is it is about growing up and coming to terms with your past and understanding that things can't be the way that they were when you guys were growing up. And it's why you have to like savor moments and trips like these when they happen, you know? And what's funny too is that every moment that you think that Kieran Culkin's gonna like go a little nuts and ruin things and it's gonna turn into like a crazy caper, it's always like pushing you right to that point, but it never goes there. And it's almost like this like it's almost like this
grounded in reality.
It's this very it's this very elongated game that this movie is playing with you, you know, up until the very end, and you almost don't want to stop playing. And but that's how good this was. I really was completely blown away by this. All right, since that was my Dustin and mine's number 4, Chris, you're number 3.
Right. My number 3 of the year is The Substance. I don't really have much more to add to this that you haven't already. Other than that, I think it's just truly a body horror film for the books. One of the best horror films I've seen in a while. Even though I wouldn't say it's necessarily like a straight up horror film. It's you know, there's sci-fi elements here. In terms of its tone, it's definitely like much more of a drama than a comedy. But there's some dark comedy here too. But just in terms of like everything that this director was trying to say, and I feel like focus on, she really just did everything just so masterfully here. You have 2 outstanding performances from Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, both of who are top of their game. They're both phenomenal here, and Dennis Quaid, although he's not in it as much as they are, I think he puts in great work here too. It's superbly like directed and shot and edited, especially some of the best, if not the best, editing of the year. And what I thought was just so refreshing about this movie is how it's a movie that just progressively just gets crazier and crazier up until it's, you know, it just ends, but without feeling, and again, I respect both of your perspectives on this, without feeling pretentious, without feeling obnoxious. And I feel like as absurd and unhinged as it gets in its final moments and its third act, it is a film that, as you mentioned, I feel like you know, there's one end where you can say it's, you know, about beauty standards and all that is true, what I would say the film's ultimately like just message is about, though, is about it's an examination on the psychological impact of the pressure of feeling beautiful, and everything that I think happens in this story, I feel like is just explores that in a way that, as absurd and bizarre as and twisted as it is, it's there, and I think it works really, really well. I'll say this too, just like my number 4 and 5 of the year. This and my number 2 of the year, which I'll talk about later on, were also very interchangeable for me. But I love this. One of the decade's best thus far.
Yes, yes, indeed. All right, Dustin, what is your number 3?
The Brutalist.
Da-na-na-na.
Yep. Brady Corbet, man. He's one to look out for, man. He's gonna be an elite director one of these days, I would say, because like between this and Vox Lux, I never saw his first film, Childhood of a Leader, but between this and Vox Lux, this dude is awesome, and I think this might be better than Vox Lux. The more I think about it, it's more grand. The performances are more fleshed out. I just think it's beautiful. Like it's just like insanely good. Like, is the last scene a little on the nose? Sure, but I still think it ties it all together. And for a 3.5-hour movie, like you're saying, it's one of the most well-paced 3-hour movies that you'll ever see. And Felicity Jones, superb in this. And they give you enough of a tease of her personality in the beginning with like the narration through the letters, but like once she enters the second half, she's phenomenal and never been better. And I've always liked her. Guy Pearce, same thing. Like he's an actor who's never been really recognized ever as much as he should be, and even giving similar performances in lesser movies like Lawless, which he's also a bastard in that and like fucking insane and great. But like he's just another level in this movie. And like I guess we're pretty good on spoilers in this episode, but like you gave away the rape scene, but like I'll give away one of the craziest and most haunting lines of the year for me is when he says to Adrian Brody when he's raping him, he's like, "You're a lady of the night. You're a lady of the night." And it's just like, dude, this is beyond like gay shit. Like this is like psychological like warfare.
It's power again. Yeah. It's power, and those who are in power.
Makes you gay. I don't know. I'm just kidding.
But it's like, remember, it's not gay if you're rich.
Yeah, right. Like Diddy too. Like he just turned gay out of nowhere when he. Yeah, right.
He was converted by Quincy Jones, so there was that. But
too soon. But yeah, the brutal Adrian Brody, one of the best soon to be second time Oscar winners for a performance that's better than the previous win. Because like he was saying, like this could have been like a rehash of The Pianist, but thankfully it wasn't. You know, like it's a completely different side, a different side of the anguish, and he's a little more cool in this movie too.
Yeah. Like, I was really reaching with those. It's like, oh, they both ended ist.
I know you were.
Yeah, I was going.
Like,
yeah,
but like Laszlo Toth is like a cooler, more like interesting guy than the other guy that he played in The Pianist. Like the Pianist guy is a more like respectable, like brilliant pianist, but like he was that's just a tragic fucking story. But this guy is just like fascinating. He's like all like going from heroin to like being one of the most renowned architects in your country. It's just like nuts to me. And Adrian Brody is one of the best in the game. One of the most underrated and underappreciated because of his weird antics. You know what I mean? But like I still think he's great, and I'll defend those antics. Who doesn't want to make out with fucking Halle Berry? Who doesn't want to introduce Sean Paul in a Jamaican accent? Stop it. He's ahead of the curve. He was before Chet Hanks. I love Adrian Brody. Brady Corbet rules. This could have been Joel Egerton, Mark Rylance, Sebastian Stan as the Joel Alwyn. Stacey Martin's great in this too. This is one thing I want to say. Stacey Martin playing a sister again, right? And she's like the nicest character in the movie, hands down. Even though she's the nicest character in the movie, even though she's the daughter of the most evil person. Yep. But she even seems like genuinely nice and thoughtful. But like, and the other parallel to Vox Lux was Raffi Cassidy
Right.
playing dual roles.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I noticed that. I was like,
So
oh,
I noticed
okay.
that immediately when I saw the movie. I was
We're
like,
doing
oh my
this
God.
again.
So he's just gonna try doing this like.
Oh, I can't
every
wait to see
time?
how he. Oh, I can't wait to see how he does that with the next feature, because you know that that's going to be a recurring trend throughout all of his movies.
Raffi Cassidy just plays twins and everything.
Exactly. All right, my number 3, Nosferatu. Yeah, this was awesome. I saw this Christmas Day night. As soon as I saw it, like the opening scene alone with Lily Rose Depp, I'm like, this is a top 10 of the year. And then the rest of the movie, I'm like, okay, this is a top 5 of the year. Like, I'm glad that I saw this in The Brutalist, because, like, I'll admit my want/need to see other movies after this decreased dramatically, where I was like, I probably should watch Baby Girl and Memoir of a Snail and Flow and all these other movies. Then I saw this, I'm like, nope, I'm good. I'm done. I got it. I have everything I need. I already talked a lot about the history of this movie in the review of this that I did with Nathaniel back at the end, how this is kind of like an illegitimate bastard child of Dracula, where it was a, where it was an, what's it called? It was a non-copyrighted adaptation of the Dracula novel that Bram Stoker then sued the production company for and won. So all the previous copies of this movie were destroyed until somebody found a copy and like bootlegged it. And that's the reason why we have this movie and the legacy of this movie. So yeah, you can make the argument that sure, this is a remake, but considering that it's a remake of technically an illegitimate film, that kind of just makes this even cooler. And then you have Robert Eggers just doing his normal crazy batshit horny insane imagery and actually be the first person to show that, like, yeah, vampires are disgusting. We should not be idolizing them or thinking that they're cool in any way, shape, or form. As we see, like, Bill Skarsgård's maggot infected, just absolutely but there's nothing charming.
They always seem gross. I never understood this. Like, even with Twilight, when they tried doing this with Twilight, it's like the vampires aren't cool. Who wants to live forever and like look pale and like eat people?
You're the only person. I can promise you are the only person who has thought that I know of.
I cannot be.
That I know of.
Chris, are you want to be a vampire?
No.
Really? Okay.
Oh man.
Right,
oh, man.
He's the
I mean, well, I like. Let me preface. I do not in any way, shape, or form.
Chris is like, let me really defend that there.
Well, no, I'm not defending that. What I'll say is that, like, I can understand, like, the appeal of, like, thinking vampires are cool is just kind of, like, sort of, like, a nod to, like, Halloween or, like, the horror genre, that kind of thing. For, like, huge, like, horror, like, buffs and things like that. Like, but in terms of, like, fetishizing vampirism, no, that's
which thank you Twilight for doing that for an entire decade. But what I will say, like I said, is that the thing that I've liked about the 2020s is that the 2020s have been making vampires like scary again and being like, no, these are not things to be idolized. These are predators that will kill you and eat you and drink your blood. Kind of like Guy Pearce in The Brutalist. But he's not a vampire, but I think the metaphor still stands. But this brought like the disgust back to vampires as far as being like, and the thing that I love that Eggers did with this movie is showing the symbolic representation of how vampires are not just like the rich and powerful draining the lifeblood out of the working class, but just like a virus. And the showing how like that's what I really love that he nailed about those elements is, again, like the fact that all the animals are like being scared away, the fact that people like kind of risen into a panic, this kind of heightened anxiety state because everybody around them is getting sick and they didn't know who to trust. What's it called? Even amongst the heroes. Also, too, this does not get the happy ending that Dracula gets where they kill the monster and everybody is saved. No, literally, it's revealed that, considering the Lily Rose Depp character, who is the main character of this thing, not the Nicholas Hoult character or the Orlok character, Lily Rose Depp is the main character of this. Yeah. And she's the one who started this whole thing by waking the vampire up at the beginning, and she realizes she's the only one that can stop this. Also, again, Bill Skarsgård getting all the attention that he's getting. Lily Rose Depp, to me, gives a performance that I have not seen equaled by anybody else. The physical things that she has to do in this movie is unbelievable. And again, you got Aaron Taylor Johnson, Nicholas Hoult having the absolute best year that he's ever had for movies, Willem Dafoe, Ralph Ineson, the man with the deepest voice ever in Hollywood. The fact that
Simon
you don't
McBurney, too.
Simon McBurney, also, Emma Corrin, some of the best kid murders I've ever seen in anything. And the fact that
some of the worst child acting too.
Well, yeah, but then they get killed. So you're like, all right, it's all better for it. And then Oh man, where was I just gonna go with this? Oh yeah, the fact that you don't even recognize that that's Bill Skarsgård. Like, it's like you have to constantly tell yourself that that's Bill Skarsgård because the way they shoot it, like, again, he's kept very much at a distance, and then they slowly start to bring him a little closer, but they keep him almost fully obscured. And then when you finally see him in the light, you're like, he almost looks like a completely different person. Like, that's how good the makeup and prosthetics are. This movie was awesome. It was an absolute blast. Like, I was literally also, this is one of the first movies where ever that I've actually been like scared watching it. Like, legitimately thought I was gonna have a heart attack during it. That's how anxiety-inducing it was, and that's how awesome this was. Nosferatu. All right, let's get through these last two because we are getting late in time. Chris, you're number 2.
All right, number 2 of the year, Sean Baker's Nora. Big Sean Baker fan. I haven't watched his. I'm not too familiar with his earlier work, but I've seen everything from Tangerine up to now, and I love his movies. I think that this is just truly like a just a brilliant, just staggering work of art. Just from the way that it's set up in its narrative, with how it switches from being this sort of charming faux rom-com of sorts with Mikey Madison, who's amazing in the film, and Mark Edelstein, who I think gives one of the best breakout performances of the year. He's great in this. To being, it goes from that relationship, and then once the 3 actors you had mentioned, Yura Borisov, Karen Karagulian, and Vasha Tom. How do you say his last name again? Dustin?
See, that's the problem. You're fucked. If you don't know it, if they don't get nominated for Oscars, you're fucked.
Okay,
you're not
either
know
way,
it.
that actor.
Vashe Tomasian?
Yes, thank you. The way that they come in, as soon as that happens, it becomes the funniest movie of the year, in my opinion. Like, it just becomes this truly brilliant comedy of errors. But where it goes after that with its story, with the way it wraps up, with its conclusion, it turns into something that just feels so heartbreaking, so real, and so profound in its examination of a very deceptive relationship, or a relationship, I should say, that's just built on deception, and that clearly was never ever going to last. But it culminates to what I think is the best ending of the year, of any movie in this year. I think the last 10 minutes of this thing is just truly something special. And it's a perfect movie, in my opinion. It's just wonderful throughout. Mikey Madison, astonishing. She deserves to win the Academy Award for Best Actress. Yura Borisov is amazing here, and also gives one of the best performances of the year. And not to sleep on Karen Karagulian either, who is amazing in this and has just some of the funniest moments of the year in particular.
TikTok, Instagram. All you guys do is on TikTok, Instagram.
All right, so that moment's great, but I told Dustin, I rewatched the movie recently, and I moved him up in my list, when I was doing my nominations, and the reason why is just he has just my favorite line in the movie. Trust me, Ani, he fucked me harder, way harder than he fucked you. Like that.
What about when he's on the phone and he's like, Garnick, shut that bitch up, please.
He's amazing in this film.
Oh, it's so good.
I'm very happy he got the Independent Spirit Award.
It's so good.
Yeah, that's my number 2 of the year.
All right, Dustin, you're number 2.
Saturday Night, directed by Jason Reitman. Now, is it perfect? No. Is it my favorite Jason Reitman movie? No. Did I have a really good time watching this and rewatching it? Bet your ass I did. It's one of the most well-made movies of the year. Capturing the 70s spirit at Studio 8H 30 Rockefeller Plaza or whatever it is. It captured it. Absolutely. And 99% of the casting is perfect, and it is the best cast of the year uniformly, I would say. Gabriel LaBelle, exceptional as Lorne Michaels. Really not getting enough credit. Deserves a Best Actor campaign, in my opinion. One of the best performances of the year, for my money. And Lamorne Morris, spot on as Garrett Morris, they're not related. They're not all related. But they don't all look alike. But Lamorne Morris was perfect in this movie, and this is the best performances of his career. I've liked him for a long time, and this feels like just a beautiful serendipity for him. And and he was one of the few people who auditioned for SNL and didn't get it, but got this movie. And now look, he's phenomenal in it. But he didn't even get a NAACP or Black Reel Award nomination for this, which is nuts because he's outstanding in this. Corey Michael Smith is Chevy Chase, phenomenal. Tommy Dewey is Michael O'Donoghue. Dylan O'Brien as Dan Aykroyd was good. Matt Wood as John Belushi was terrific. Really great cast. One of the best scores of the year, John Batiste, and he was terrific in the movie too as Billy Preston. J.K. Simmons is Milton Berle. Willem Dafoe is David Tebbutt, who, probably the biggest fallacy in the movie is that David Tebbutt wasn't the guy who was like rallying against the show or like casting doubt on that night. So I don't know why they made that decision to make that guy the antagonist, quote unquote, even though he foreshadows his whole arc in his opening speech to Lorne Michaels in the elevator, where he's just like, even when people tell you not to, even me, you go against them. And it's like, okay, are you just spelling out the plot of the movie? And he kind of was. But the movie, other than that, was like super entertaining. Andrew Barth Feldman as his cousin Neil. He has one of the best sequences of the movie. And Cooper Hoffman's terrific too as Dick Ebersol. He does have like that aura that his dad had. I don't know if he's going to be as good as his dad, but he is great for especially for his age as well. Just a terrific film front to back. I think it has the best screenplay of the year, dialogue-wise specifically too. And I just think the way he directed this, the way the movie looks, the attention to detail, to the production design, the costumes, they could have got the George Carlin cast a little bit better, even though that's a fun performance. And Nicholas Braun could have been utilized a little better. But yeah, I just think this was a terrific film.
Yeah.
Loved it. Number two,
good,
Saturday
good
night.
movie. Good movie. I'm really excited to rewatch it. My number two, easily the movie that made me cry the first time and the second time when I rewatched, just to affirm it, Wild Robot. For me, this hits a little bit home because for me, what this movie does is this movie kind of works the way that Soul did when I saw that in 2020, where Soul was like the end of like the Pixar era that I had growing up, and this is like the end of the DreamWorks era that I was kind of familiar with growing up, especially since they even said this was their last movie that they were animating in-house. It's from the co-director of How to Train Your Dragon, Chris Sanders. The score is unbelievable. The animation is gorgeous. It's very, very reminiscent of Studio Ghibli as well. They're very much doing a play of like they're doing a very it's a very heartfelt, emotional story as well, with a lot of the usual old school DreamWorks goofball antics. With like I said, it's a powerhouse, just gut punch of an ending where, again, one of the most ridiculous setups ever, where you have an Elon Musk robot that crash lands and ended up befriending a bunch of woodland creatures. But the real story here being that it essentially has to act as a mom, where when it accidentally like destroys a nest of goose eggs, it ends up raising the sole survivor as its own, and it ends up kind of being this very poignant message about like what it's like to be a parent and like watch your kid go off into the world and like have to see them struggle on their own as well, and also of course the usual stuff about like teaming up with unlikely friends, overcoming adversity, all that. And like this is nothing in this movie that you haven't seen before. But it's just how well it's done, and the voiceover talent, which is all great. It's led by a spectacular Lupita Nyong'o performance, who hits all the beats that you would expect her to, and more. Yeah, it made me cry both times I saw it, and I'm not ashamed to have put it I'm not ashamed to put it this high, because it is just that good. Wild Robot. All right, Chris, wrap it up. What's your number one best of the year?
All right, my number one of the year is Jane Schonbrun's I Saw the TV Glow.
All right.
I've watched this movie 4 times now. I saw it. I drove an hour and a half to see it back in June. It didn't come to a theater like near me until June, even though it got its limited release in May. And ever since I saw this movie, I have thought about this movie every waking day of my life. It's a movie that has haunted me. It's a movie that just has made me think so much about what I know. Obviously, that Jane Schonbrun, has cited this film as being a film about the trans experience and all that. And I think those elements of the story, I think, are there. I think they're present. I think they're explored in a way that's very poignant and clearly feels very personal. But I think beyond that, what I think it really struck me about this story is ultimately it's a story about pain and dejection, in the sense that you're watching Owen and Maddie, two characters that are just so deeply kind of like heartbroken and just so deeply like at like far removed from the space that they occupy and the worlds that they live in, and how much they seem to just fail to fit into society, and how heartbroken they are with their relationships and their families and everything like that. And they just find this show, which in the film is the pink opaque, that they use as a means of escapism. And what I think that's just so beautiful about this movie and this story ultimately is it's a poignant yet simultaneously devastating story about the things that we bring into our lives when we're lost, when we're feeling confused, when we're alone, that bring meaning to us, and what that does to us, what that does to us mentally, what that means to us over time, and how no matter how confusing things get over time, we always have those things. We always have those things that live in our hearts. And I know that in the context of this movie, that's obviously a lot more complex and has a lot more weight to it than just being just that for director Jane Schonbrun. But I think it's an incredibly well made film. I think the cinematography is the best of the year for my money. I love the editing, the score, the soundtrack I've listened to a million times. So many good songs, just such brilliant utilizations of of just the original songs. And I know A24, I think they spent I forget how much money they spent. They got like 15 original artists to just write like 15 original songs for this, which I think is really, really cool. And the performances I think are terrific. I love Justice Smith here. One of my favorite performances of the year, that I think just brings so much internalized pain and sadness, and he plays it in a way that just feels so just real and powerful and heartbreaking. And I loved him in this movie, and I loved everything about this movie. It's just every time I watch it, it makes me cry so much, just because of just how things go and how it unfolds. And it's become one of my favorite movies of all time. I could go on and on about this movie for hours, about how much every scene in this movie just means so much to me. It's not only is it my favorite movie of the year, it's top 3 favorite movies of the decade so far. It's just I love this movie. I saw the TV Glow Best Movie of the Year.
Yeah, really solid movie. I did like it. It's just the reason why it didn't ultimately make my top 10 or my number ones is just the mumblecore nature of it. And I thought the ending kind of just meandered and went off the rails a little bit.
What are the other 2 for you, Chris?
Oh, just for this decade, Everything Everywhere All at Once is my favorite of the decade. Yeah, this would be my number 2, and probably Soul, number 3.
Hell yeah, let's go. Let's fucking go. It's my number 1.
That was Dominic's one.
Yeah.
All right. My number 1.
Best movie of the decade.
My number 1 of the year is Honora, directed by Sean Baker. Yeah, this is Sean Baker's best movie. This feels like the movie he was born to make, because I have seen all of his movies now, all of them. And I got to say, this is definitely worth doing, because this is worth being a filmmaker if you're going to end up making a movie like this, is my point. Because everything he's tried to tackle in the past, he's perfectly realized here. And he never strays away from Honora, like, almost ever in this movie. Like, almost ever. The only time is, like, the phone call with Karen Karagulian, but, like, she's still, like, in the periphery, kind of, I would say, because they're going to the kid's house. But this movie is a perfect character study almost. And Mikey Madison really transforms and disappears into the role. And she is just a bombshell in this. Like, she is just, like, probably the hottest girl in a movie this year. But, like, the most compelling performance, because you're on her side, like, the whole time, even though she kind of has, like, nefarious, like, sort of, like, intentions at first, even though she does seem like she does really like this guy, or she might be tricking herself into believing that. I don't know. It's the most complicated and interesting examination of a sex worker he's done yet. And he probably should stop now with that, tackling that subject matter. But alongside her, Yura Borisov, of course, has been getting surprisingly, like, the most buzz for this film out of the supporting cast, but he gives a great, subdued, worth the wait performance. And every time he does speak, it makes an impact. And he is either genuinely profound or hilarious in this whenever he speaks. No exaggeration. Yura Borisov is somebody I hope doesn't get typecast as, like, a heavy in other movies. You know what I mean? So hopefully not. Vache Tomasian was great and has, like, some of the best, like, lines of the year, I would say. He's like, I'm not supposed to touch the motherfucker. Like, how am I supposed to?
She's an animal, bro. Be careful.
She's an animal.
I've got a concussion, man. What do you want me to do? Don't fall asleep. Don't fall asleep.
I forgive you.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, and Karen Karagulian, by the way, like, he's been in all of his movies from four-letter words and on. Like, he's been in all of his movies, and this is the first juicy role that he's fully got. Like, he's tried giving him, like, an arc in, like, stuff like Tangerine and, like, the newly Criterion Prince of Broadway, but this is the first movie where his subplot and his character doesn't seem distracting from the narrative, and he's hysterical in this movie and seamlessly goes from Armenian to Russian to American flawlessly, and just has, like, he's the funniest character in the movie to me. And the kid is hysterical too, even though from the very first scene you could tell that, like, Sean Baker's not hiding that this kid's a piece of shit from the first fucking scene.
Yeah.
Just the way that he's interacting and not even, like, acknowledging the head owner of the club when he's introducing. Like, you could just tell, like, from little, like, choices like that. Sean Baker knew what he was doing. And, like, I just want to throw out a special shout out. If Mikey Madison was the number one, the number two hottest girl in movies this year was the Diamond. Yep. That scene where, like, that song is like, and when she's dancing on the guy, I get why she's her rival. That scene proved it. I was like, yep, she knows what she's doing.
This is another one where, again, just based off the opening scene where it's just the tracking shot following all the strippers as they're just shaking their asses. I'm like, this is top 10 of the year easily.
Like, yeah, I know, but beyond that, like, her friend too was, like, pretty hot also, and she was. I liked her little line deliveries too. But like, don't have a heart attack, but Diamond's in the room with your husband. Like, that was great. But, like, all of, like, the non-actors that he's ever used in his other movies, like, you can kind of, like, spot the non-actors. In this movie, you would be hard pressed, other than the chick from Red Rocket, the gangster chick.
Yeah. I noticed her.
Like, exactly, because she wasn't good in Red Rocket.
No.
But Ivy Wolk wasn't even distracting in this. You know what I mean? Yeah, it was very good. This and Don't Look Up are easily the best movies of the decade for me, and are the only movies that are circling a 10 for me.
Oh, man.
The more I rewatch them.
For me, I still think of the line that she has. She's like, "Oh, that's right. You're such a classy hoe." That killed me. I think that was the first line where I'm like, "Oh, this is incredible." Like, when I heard that was great. All right, my number 10. This should come as absolutely no surprise. Everybody who knows me knows it. It's not winning Best Picture, but it's winning Best Picture in my heart. It's Dune 2. This is, yeah. I mean, come on. Is anybody surprised by this at all? Like, the fact that we have all these movies that we've all talked about for the last 2 goddamn hours now, and as soon as I saw this, I'm like, yeah, it's number 1 of the year, easily. In a way, I'm kind of glad.
Voice.
What?
I thought your favorite of the year was going to be Nickel.
Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. We're not doing this now.
I thought it was going to be Twisters.
Yeah, definitely. The best 5-star, 3-star movie ever made. Yeah, like as soon as I saw part 1 back in 2021, I'm like, okay, this was good, but like after I'd read the book, I'm like, oh, this is the part that's going to have all the actual good stuff in it. This is going to be the part where he's actually teaming up with the Fremen. Like, part 1, like, is good, but it's all set up. That's all it is. Like, this is the one where it's like, we get him teaming up with the Fremen. We get Javier cooking just with every scene. We got Austin Butler as Fade Routha doing
he was the best of the movie.
Unbelievable stuff.
Austin Butler rules.
Yeah. Also, the fact that this is the movie that after all these years of complete misinterpretations of Herbert's work finally hammers home the point. Paul Atreides is not the fucking hero here. He's the bad guy. This is not a hero origin story. This is a villain origin. You all thought that the Harkonnens and the Emperor were bad. Yeah, he got his sweet, sweet vengeance, but now he's God Emperor and like gonna declare war on the universe. Like, these are like if anything, like it kind of like would go under the radar as far as, because again, the spectacle was going to be the most talked about part of this. But in the year 2024, I would argue the year that we were at our most skeptical and least trustful of those in power. This to me is the ultimate cautionary tale against achieving absolute power, you know? Because again, that's the thing about it is, you get all this momentum and you have all these people that are rooting for you and championing you because you're better than the seeming, you know, current status. But then they get that power and then everything shifts, you know? It's just kind of the whole idea of this story is just all about how, again, we should not, how ultimately, first of all, nobody should ever have this much power, and it goes so much to say that it doesn't matter what the term is, a president, a prime minister, nobody should ever have this much executive governance power over the rest of the body of people. It shouldn't be a thing. I'm sorry, but like that shouldn't be a thing. Also, you know, absolute power corrupts, and those who set out to have the best, those who set out with the best intentions often end up causing the most harm. And that, to me, is ultimately the reason as to why this isn't just more spectacle affair. And yeah, the spectacle's fucking amazing. I mean, come on. Like, all the action sequences, like, Marvel wished that they could have done action sequences this good. Because from the opening shot of the Harkonnen soldiers floating up off the ground, and just the way that that is framed against the sunset, all the way to the ultimate just absolute pounding that Paul and his forces do against the Harkonnens and the Emperor's forces at the end. It's just a spectacle untold. It's one of the biggest spectaculars of the decade so far. And yeah, I'm really, really happy that Denny was finally able to kind of achieve this as his magnum opus, and that Dune, the property, was able to get the right amount of attention that it deserved. And yeah, it was the number one of the year as soon as I saw it, and I was waiting for something else to top it, and nothing else did. So yeah.
No, all right, that's have all that power.
Yep, exactly. That's what happens. All right, so running down the lists again. Just no recap, you guys, because again, this is a long episode. This is already, I think, the longest episode that we've done so far this year. This is almost as long as the Brutalist. Chris's top 10. Number 10, Dee Dee. Number 9, Saturday Night. Number 8, Sing Sing. Number 7, Kinds of Kindness. Number 6, Nosferatu. Number 5, Memoir of a Snail. Number 4, The Brutalist. Number 3, The Substance. Number 2, Anora. And number 1, I Saw the TV Glow. Dustin's top 10. Number 10, Dee Dee. Number 9, Better Man. Number 8, The Substance. Number 7, His Three Daughters. Number 6, The Apprentice. Number 5, Trap. Number 4, A Real Pain. Number 3, The Brutalist. Number 2, Saturday Night. And number 1, Anora. And my top 10, number 10, Queer. Number 9, Transformers 1. Number 8, The Apprentice. Number 7, The Brutalist. Number 6, Anora. Number 5, The Substance. Number 4, A Real Pain. Number 3, Nosferatu. Number 2, The Wild Robot. And number 1, Dune 2, the ultimate, undisputed Best Picture winner. It's winning Best Picture. I don't care. It's the greatest. It's the best movie of all time. It's the worst Trump impression I've ever done. I promise you I can do better. But yeah, that was it. We have one more of these 2024 year wrap list. We're doing best TV shows next week, and then we're finally going to start breaking down and analyzing some new content for the year of 2025. But it was a blast having you two on. This is the longest episode that hopefully that we'll have done so far of the year. Chris, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
You can follow me on Letterboxd, Chris _ NAR 3 I's NE. You can follow me on there if you want to see my ratings for movies and my movie lists, things like that. Yeah.
All right, Dustin, socials, plug them.
YouTube, Mr. G Movie Reviews, Letterboxd, Dustin Mason.
All right. And you guys know where to follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews, at Official Talkin TV Podcast. Subscribe on YouTube. We're doing our next episode of Talkin' Lost tomorrow. That'll be good to tune into. Like I said, only 2 episodes left after this week. And as always, people, 12 seasons of a short film. Watch more fucking movies. See you guys next time. See ya.